Today I have a conversation with Jurgen Spaanderman from the Dutch Central Bank, DNB, and he has written a very interesting occasional study about an urgent call to get better prepared for unexpected events. And this is the study that we will be talking about. Jurgen, welcome. Who is Jurgen Spaanderman and how did you come to write this occasional study?
Thank you, Lex. Thank you so much for inviting me here, for giving the opportunity to talk about my study, my publication. I'm with the Dutch Central Bank. I'm working on one of the key tasks of central banking, and that is the promotion of smooth functioning of payment systems. So I work for quite a few years already on policy and economic issues, though I'm an electrotechnical engineer by education, and that is also part of the clarification why I took a very multidisciplinary approach in this study. The opinion I will give is my personal opinion. I wrote this with DNB, but it's not necessarily everything I say is the policy of DNB. So where did it start? Actually, quite a few years ago, I kept on being surprised of all kind of forecasts that I saw, economic forecast, lasting for years, on forecast on economic growth, on world trade, and it's from the known national, international institutions where you see that this growth is predicted for, say, 2-3 years ahead, but each time, each quarter, you see that it is adjusted. And sometimes these adjustments, they add up in 2 years, that it's an adjustment of 50%. So I think, how come? And this is actually something very important because politicians, they base their policies on these numbers. And then I thought it's not just in economic numbers on the economy at large, but it's also like if you see the uptake of solar panels, World Energy Outlook, they in 2001 they predict what will be the increase, and you see a straight line in the diagrams, and then each year it's adjusted, and each year the line goes up and up. It's getting steeper. So what you eventually get is an exponential. And then I thought, like, how come? Are these models not capable of producing an exponential in the first place? So actually, it looks like the models we use for these things are not so easy in coping with exponentials or other sudden changes. And then with the financial crisis in our head, there were also economic models not very helpful in forecasting these disruptions that we've seen. So that made me wonder, like, do we use the right models? Is it a probability where we have difficulties dealing with? Is it something with the brain? And do we prefer to think in linear models rather than in more exponentials or power laws or these sort of things? And particularly phase transitions. I mean, to my understanding, actually, lots of economic models don't really cater for that. Actually, I focus mostly on the economic models, economic sides, but it's as much applicable to say a flood. We get surprised if there's a flood, though we build a system to protect the city. We get surprised when there's a meltdown in a chemical plant, but we did, of course, the whole design as humans. We made our calculations on risk. We took measures to mitigate the risk. And then we agreed on residual risk. We end up in numbers like, well, something, this and this may happen once in a 10,000 year, once in 100,000 year. And then, what happens in people's mind? I mean, do we think like once in a 10,000 year means it's not going to happen in my lifetime? Do we push it away? So, these questions, and then there was a certain moment in a television interview for 3 hours with Ray Kurzweil, and he explained on information technology and on the exponential technologies, and he made a clear case for how everything that becomes information theory, so say all the products that get dematerialized, they eventually follow a path through networks. You can distribute information, of course, very fast, much faster than tangible goods. So you get different dynamics, and he called it exponential technologies because information applications, their development goes very fast. It's like a linear on a log scale, so it's exponentials. Linear on a log scale, but what he shows is that actually over the last century, if you look at all the different technologies that we had, also before the transistor, vacuum tubes, etc., there you see already that even the exponential is growing. So you see the straight line in the log scale, you see it's going up. And that's what we see today. We see companies that were not there 10, 15 years ago and that have now a dominant position. Companies on messaging services, on travel, bookings, all the things that we know. And they have changed the economy quite a bit. And that made me wonder, so if these also cause exponentials, then this is actually the whole issue of that we have difficulties with dealing that, and that our models are not coping with that easily. That makes actually the whole thing worse. So all these things put together, I start reading lots of books and articles and trying to get into it. Of course, this is very relevant for a central bank because it changes the economy, it changes the parties, the stakeholders in the economy. There are different parties that acting now in the payment system than before. It also affects banks. You can run an old digital bank at probably 30% of the cost of an old-fashioned bank with branch offices. As a consequence, it has also for, if you see in information technology, in nanotech, you see it in our DNA sequencing, everything we know more from our bodies, from say the chances that we will get a certain disease. If you have this information, the data richness that we are seeing at the moment, that means if we know much better on these things, then that will have tremendous impact on insurances. There's a risk that if I know there's a certain risk about diseases that I can game an insurance company. If it leads to much longer lifetimes, then the longevity issue, of course, has firm consequences for pensions, for life insurances. So it basically touches on lots of tasks of a central bank. So what I did is I dived into many of these subjects, but the major one being the brain, how does the brain works. And so I touched upon behavioral economics, on psychology, neuroscience. There's actually too much to read, so it kept on being a hard thing to choose where to go in and where not. But what I found is that once we still have normal distributions, when we have linearity, then we are quite well equipped of imagining average lengths of a group of people. We can easily imagine that, and we can make good estimates. But the very moment that it is different, when you go to say logs, power laws, if you have distributions like say average income and you have 9 factory workers and 1 multi-billionaire, we communicate average numbers, but the average of course is meaningless, at least meaningless to the factory workers. So Kahneman explained very well on the fast thinking, the slow thinking, the fast one being sort of an heuristic actually that we know about what it should be, and often this is the proper answer, but it goes a bit at the cost of accuracy. And Nassim Taleb also described very nice on randomness, how difficult it is for a human brain to deal with random events. What we do usually in our head is we connect one event to the other, we correlate them, we make a story. Often the story is simply not true, it's a narrative fallacy as it's called. So we are full with biases, we are not that rational probably as we think. But this actually may be one of the explanations why, if we come up with a residual risk of once in a 10,000 years, why we simply start neglecting this, because it is something we cannot imagine. It's very small likelihood, though it's a big impact if something goes wrong there, but we push it away. Humans are not that very well capable of dealing with long-term risk. We both overestimate and underestimate in various occasions. So that's one avenue. Another one is the modeling. I dive more into what the models are, what we do with the models, what we assume for economic models, say the mainstream models. And although they include dynamics and stochastic behavior, still we assume usually that the economy is sort of an understandable machine, and that it is seeking equilibrium. We always hope that we move to a new normal or to the normal that we had, but we want to have it going somewhere to an equilibrium. That's one of the assumptions. Also the homogeneity of agents. We assume once there's information that all the agents have access to the same information. Well, and in practice, these things are not the case. And then I came across literature on complex systems, on complex adaptive systems, and I thought, like, well, this is describing much better what is going on in the economy. So I'm definitely not the first one having a plea for complex theory here, but I think it has to get much more attention. We have to put many more resources in using these models. Though the challenge there is that complexity doesn't provide very nice long-term forecast. It's simply not capable to do that. And the problem is not caused by the complexity, but it's caused by the very fact that the economy is a complex system. It's similar to whether it's being the weather or the climate. We're talking all the time about climate lately, but in the end, if we see as people that these are complex systems, we are not in control. I think we have to be much more humble on these systems, and much better use different models. And if you use the complex models, then what you certainly can do is to make all kind of calculations. You can do scenarios. So you can say, well, assume that the agents are heterogeneous. Some have information, others have not. What is going to happen? What's going to happen if we change the interest rate, for instance, with quarter point and another quarter point? And it might be, if you do that a few times, that you see quite a linear outcome, but there might be at a certain point when you move to in another area, another quarter, may lead to moving away to sort of the edge of the system, to the edge of chaos. And if you do these sort of experiments, you get all kind of different outcomes. You get in the end a distribution of outcomes. And based on these outcomes, you can make decisions on what you would like to do. So I would I advise to embrace much more the complex adaptive system approach. It's not going to give us long-term forecast, though what it does give us is a different view of the system that we have. And it also shows that where the strong, that it may actually lead to a different setup, a different design in the financial system. Because typically in complex systems, you see that there's emergent behavior. Small events may grow very fast. You see path dependencies. That means if there's a small advantage, you get followers, and that of course creates a benefit for others to adhere. So something small grows fast. You see that on websites, you see that on say a message service, and suddenly these small parties become very, very large. Well, if you keep these sort of developments in our mind to what will be a more robust system, or what would be a more resilient system, because in the end that's what we're aiming for in terms of economics and financial system, then you end up in different conditions for your design. Then you see that it's much better to have more smaller players and not one or a few big players. The too big to fail issue becomes very clear, very visible if you take this approach. And also the heterogeneity of actors. So stakeholders, we are much better off when the stakeholders have different dynamics and are in different phase, and that they're all the same. For sure, we're not going to get rid of disruptions. So that's another thing that we have to cope with, is that if we know that, then we much better prepare for that, in the sense that we should limit the consequences, limit the impact of a disruption. It's like with the lightning. We know lightning will strike so now and then, so what did we do? We built a system to deal with that and to limit the impact and not getting fires all over the place. So, to wrap up, what I see here is the financial system, I think, is going to be shaken up quite a bit because of information theory, the advances there, more parties in the market. I think that's going to cause more exponential curves in more fast developments and disruptions. That means if you keep in mind that us humans have difficulties in our brain to deal with such big changes, we have to come with solutions like to compensate for where we have our biases. I was thinking maybe that could be done with artificial intelligence help, or something that keeps us sharp for if we choose the path of heuristics, that we have something to warn us for this event once in 10,000 years. And we have to move to different models. We have to see the economy as an evolutionary, complex, adaptive system, and then take from there different designs, but also different models, and agent-based models that are available, for sure, are not going to give us long-term predictions, but they will provide us with all kinds of opportunities to see what the consequences of policies are, and that we may end up in an area where, that it's better to know in advance than before we make decisions on that. And last but not least, I think it's important that these findings are also included in our educational system, because if our educational system teaches, so to say, mainstream models, linear thinking, then it's pretty hard to make this change. So it's like, I think even in primary school, next to multiplication tables, you can teach young kids exponentials. That's what I did with my own kids, and so they get a more open frame. And then you see also in secondary school, you can dive much more into exponentials, power laws, and so on. I think the information theory, the exponential technologies, is going to make a huge impact in society, and that clarifies also why I think that the call for getting better prepared is a very urgent one.
Thank you, Jurgen, for your explanation of your occasional study. By the title, I repeat it again: an urgent call to get better prepared for unexpected events. Very worthwhile reading, I would say. Thank you once again, Jurgen.
Thank you so much, Lex. It was great.